EVO.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 174, an update on the Kouri Richins murder trial. Hey, Criminal Mischief Nation. So back in August of 2024, we covered the shocking arrest of Kouri Richins. Remember, she was the mother of three who was charged with her husband, Eric Richins' murder. Now, part of the reason it was so shocking was because you might recall that after her husband's death, Kouri self-published a children's book to help her three small children process the grief of their father's unexpected death. And then, not long after the publication of that book, she appeared on a local Utah TV station, talking about the grief and how they were all processing it, and she was trying to help her children get through it. And then not long after that, she was actually arrested and charged with her husband Eric's murder. So a huge case, and Kouri from the beginning has pleaded not guilty. And so now, nearly 3 years after her arrest, her trial is underway, and there have been some shocking revelations, which we are going to get into. But before we do, this week on Criminal Mischief, we are re-releasing our Heartless episode to catch you up to speed on the case. And then after, stay with us for our bonus episode where my co-host Brandon Morgan and I will go over the absolute latest in the trial. So here's episode 93, Criminal Mischief's Heartless. All individuals mentioned in this podcast are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. When a parent of young children dies unexpectedly, for the surviving parent, the grief can be overwhelming, but nothing compared to the weight of coming up with the words as you look into your children's innocent eyes that their beloved father is dead, that their dad, who went to bed just a few hours before, seemingly healthy and happy, is gone forever. This is the situation that 33-year-old Utah mother Kouri Richins found herself in March of 2022. After finding her husband of nearly a decade cold to the touch in their bed, the young widow would quickly learn that breaking the news to her children that their father, Eric, was dead was just the beginning, and that living life day to day without their dad, who was the kind of father who coached his young son's sports teams and attended all their games and activities. How do you explain that to children, that he was gone? As a way to cope, Kouri would write a children's book about their loss. Here she is speaking with the hosts of Good Things Utah.
No matter if it's a parent, a sibling, or a friend, talking about loss with kids can be a tricky subject. Joining us now is author of Are You With Me? Kouri Richins, to share her 3 C's to helping kids cope with grief. And Kouri, I want to start with your story. What happened in your personal life?
So my husband passed away unexpectedly last year. So it's March 4th was a 1-year anniversary for us. And he was 39. It completely took us all by shock. And we have 3 little boys, 10, 9, and 6. And, my kids and I kind of wrote this book on the different emotions and grieving processes that we've experienced last year. And, hoping that it can kind of help other kids, deal with this and kind of, find happiness some way or another.
You can tell that the hosts were super affected by Kouri and her children's story.
But really letting your kids understand that you know why they're feeling the way that they are feeling, and it's okay, and let's deal with it and talk about it.
There's a promotion right now. Get a free copy of the book April 30th and May 1st through Amazon Kindle. You are an amazing woman and mom, and we thank you for being vulnerable and sharing this and touching the lives of others.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here.
So, thank you, Kouri.
Guys.
Thank you.
Who could have predicted that shortly after this interview, the same grieving widow, Kouri Richins, would be arrested and charged with the murder of her husband, Eric Richins, the man she dedicated this book to?
A Summit County woman who wrote a children's book about coping with grief following her husband's death, now accused of being the one that actually killed him.
Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 93, Heartless. Camas, Utah. Driving through the landscape feels majestic, as if you're a part of a living canvas, a blanket of meandering hills that slope into each other, lazily giving the appearance of connectedness, that somehow time just stops here, that this land could just go on forever. And once in town, everything is as you'd expect for a quiet, rural Americana experience. A place where I imagine people probably say, everyone knows everyone. And it's in this place that Kouri and her husband, Eric Richins, would raise their 3 young boys. Now, before that, Kouri had met Eric in 2009 when she was working at a local Home Depot. Eric, as a successful contractor, was a frequent customer, and she caught his attention. He was naturally a bit shy, but at some point, he plucked up the courage to ask for Kouri's number. It wasn't long before they went out on their first date, and in 2013, they got married. As they started building their life together, Eric's business continued to prosper, and by this time, Kouri had started her own successful real estate company. She specialized in flipping homes and had a real passion for buying distressed properties that she would then fix up and sell for a profit. Life was busy for both Eric and Kouri, but at the center of their family were their boys, who were the light of their lives. Looking at a photograph of the family on vacation, you might be tempted to say that they appear to have it all. A successful, beautiful young couple, Kouri's at the center, her boys are surrounding her like little cubs, with her husband, Eric, firmly behind her, his arms encircle all 4 in a warm embrace. The image is of a perfect couple, of a perfect family. But on March 4th, 2022, this carefully curated version of their lives would all come crashing down. In the early morning hours, Kouri would make a frantic call to 911. She had found her husband in bed, cold to the touch, and unconscious. The dispatcher tells Kouri she needs to begin administering CPR and talks her through it. However, not long after emergency medical staff arrive and attempt life-saving measures, it was too late, and they would pronounce Eric dead. How did this seemingly healthy 39-year-old father of 3 just go to bed one night and not wake up? Let's just say there wasn't an obvious answer. Paramedics wondered, did he die of an aneurysm? When the medical examiner arrived, they began asking Kouri questions about what had happened that night. And Kouri would explain that at around 9 p.m., she, Eric, and her mother, Lisa, were celebrating because Kouri had just closed on a home that she planned to flip. Kouri made her husband a special drink called a Moscow Mule, a combination of vodka, ginger beer, and lime juice, a super refreshing, fizzy drink. After Kouri's mother left, the family settled in for the night. But not long after, Kouri would say that her son had a night terror, and so she got up and went to sleep with him at around 9:45. She then awoke at around 3 a.m. and crept back into her and Eric's bedroom. This is when she realized, as she laid down next to him, that he was cold and unresponsive. When asked if Eric was on any medication, Kouri would say that he'd taken a THC gummy that night. But aside from the gummies, he wasn't a drug user. I mean, she told him that in high school, he'd once had an addiction to painkillers, but that was a long time ago and nothing since. A red flag went up, though, after a deputy would ask Kouri if she gave CPR to Eric. She would say that she did. But this didn't match what the first responder had said, that when they began chest compressions, blood immediately began to pour out of Eric's mouth, which could be considered an indication that no CPR had been attempted. Was it possible that Eric had died from an aneurysm? The only way to know for sure would be to do an autopsy, and that would take time. In the meantime, small towns, people talk. And 2 days after Eric's death, they had even more to gossip about. One of Eric's sisters, Amy, had been visiting Eric and Kouri's home, and as she was leaving, she noticed that Kouri had called a locksmith and that he was going to open up her brother's safe. Now, it's been alleged that the safe contained between $125,000 and $165,000 in cash. What Kouri didn't know was that a couple of years before Eric died, he'd opened up a trust where he placed all of his assets and named his sister, Katie, as his beneficiary. Here's Amy describing events that took place after Eric's death.
Immediately after Eric was killed, Kouri told us she could not help us get anything ready for the funeral as she was too distraught with grief. We shortly found out that was not true at all. In fact, she pulled herself together enough to go close on the purchase of a $2 million home, hire a real estate agent, hire an architect to create CAD drawings of the home, hire a lawyer in order to file a lawsuit on Eric's trust, hire a locksmith to come break into and clean out my brother's safe, and attempt to have Eric cremated. She mustered up the strength and resolve to do most of this within 48 hours of his death.
Amy says she will never forget the morning that Kouri attacked her.
Kouri assaulted me. I will never forget the look in her eyes when she attacked me that Sunday morning. It was early and had been snowing most of the night. I was just getting ready to leave and heading out to the car when I saw a locksmith in Eric's detached garage starting to drill out his gun safe. I asked Kouri multiple times why we could not just call my dad for the code. I could not understand why she was breaking into and ruining Eric's safe. To this, she screamed at me at the top of her lungs, called me some inappropriate things I cannot share with you here, and then told me to get out of her house. It was then that I told her that she could not kick me out of my brother's house. My sister Katie was now the executor of Eric's trust and estate, and just like Eric, she would not want the defendant breaking into his gun safe. Kouri looked at me with pure hatred and rage. I was messing up her plan. I was getting in her way, and because of that, she attacked me. She punched me in the face and neck multiple times. It took 4 people to pull her off me that day.
After Amy left the house that day, she would call the police and report what happened. A month later, Kouri would be charged with assault, to which she pleaded no contest. So many questions when someone seemingly healthy passes away suddenly. And as everyone waited for the autopsy report to come back, all anyone could really do was speculate. I mean, his death was so shocking to the community, as it always is when a young, seemingly healthy person dies suddenly. He was a pillar in the community. He coached his son's Little League games and had a successful business. People try to make sense of a senseless death like this. Causes people to question their own mortality. Was it possible that Eric had an undiagnosed illness? Had he suffered an aneurysm? 3 weeks after Eric's death, it would be determined that he had died from a lethal dose of fentanyl from pills. It was shocking, and the amount of fentanyl in Eric's body was 5 times a lethal dose. Even more shocking, the fentanyl in his system wasn't the pharmaceutical grade, but the illicit kind. His death just didn't track with the way he appeared to live his life. Now, Kouri and her side of the family wondered if Eric had taken something laced with fentanyl and didn't know it, or had he purposely taken his own life. When Eric's family heard the news, they did not believe that he died from an accidental drug overdose, or a self-inflicted one, but that he had been intentionally poisoned, because Eric had confided in them that if something happened to him, Kouri was to blame. And this allegation wasn't the only bombshell. According to court documents, the family would tell investigators that Eric and Kouri had been arguing about buying that nearly $2 million property, the one she told police that they'd been celebrating the night of his death. They would say that Eric had been planning on telling her that he wasn't going to sign the papers which would help her get that house, and that the day after Eric's death, when Kouri would say she was grieving and couldn't help with the funeral, that she allegedly signed the closing papers on that mansion. In this same affidavit, Eric's family would make other allegations against Kouri that they believe she had tried to poison him 2 other times before his death. They would tell police that when Eric and Kouri went on a vacation with friends to Greece in 2019, that Eric had become violently ill after Kouri had given him a drink, that he'd called a family member saying that he believed his wife had tried to kill him. And another time, on Valentine's Day 2022, roughly a month before Eric had died, Kouri had given him a sandwich. After he took one bite, he immediately broke into hives and couldn't breathe. Eric had been able to inject himself with his son's EpiPen and chugged from a bottle of Benadryl before passing out for several hours. Again, according to his family, after he woke up, he supposedly called his friend, saying he believed his wife was trying to poison him. But what was Kouri's motive? From the outside looking in, she had a successful real estate business. Why would she want her husband dead? So, Eric dies on March 4th, 2022. And on April 8th, that toxicology report comes back that confirms that Eric had died from a massive overdose. But how would he get those fentanyl pills? Because based on interviews with friends and family, there was just no indication that Eric was a drug user or that he had any behavioral changes that would indicate drug abuse. But investigators would find a connection to drugs, but not from Eric's network, but from Kouri's personal housekeeper. According to court documents, she's referred to as CL. So CL would clean Kouri and Eric's house, but she also helped Kouri with her residential real estate business. CL had a police record for multiple counts of possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute. They had to look into whether or not the housekeeper supplied Kouri with fentanyl pills that she then placed in the drink she prepared for her husband the night before he went to bed. A search warrant of their home would be executed on April 11th, and during that search, they wouldn't find any evidence of fentanyl or residue of the drug. They would, however, seize Kouri's phone and several computers. And on her phone, they would recover several text messages between her and CL, which appeared to have been deleted between the time frame of March 1st through March 15th. So they were able to recover them, these texts, but they weren't able to read what was said. Detectives would interview CL on May 2nd, and it was then that she would admit to supplying Kouri with 15 to 30 fentanyl pills on 2 separate occasions, approximately 1 month before Eric's death. During a year-long investigation, detectives would also find out that both Eric and Kouri had considered getting a divorce. There was an alleged infidelity on both sides, but they had mutually decided to go to couples therapy and work on their relationship. This is when, unbeknownst to Kouri, in November of 2020, Eric would put his estate in a secret trust for the boys and name his sister Katie as the beneficiary. You lose weight, it comes back. Then you lose it again, and it comes back again with a vengeance. If this cycle sounds familiar to you, there's a better, more sustainable way to lose weight. What if you could take a weekly shot to shed those pounds and keep them off? If you've heard of Ozempic or Wegovy, then you've probably heard 3 things. They're effective, but expensive, and they're in high demand, which means they're hard to get. But you're in luck because there's Ro. Through Ro, you can access prescription compounded GLP-1s with the same weight loss ingredient as brand name GLP-1s at a fraction of the cost. Not only does Ro have compounded GLPs in stock right now, but Ro members also receive support throughout their entire process. Which means if you're eligible for medication, you can have access to your provider on demand for any questions. And Ro makes it super easy to see if you qualify from the comfort of your own home. This means no scheduling a doctor's appointment, no commute into that doctor appointment, and no waiting rooms. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in 1 to 4 days. And because you're a Criminal Mischief listener, we're going to save you some money. Go to ro.co/mischief. That's MISCHIEF. Memberships start at just $99 for your first month. Medication costs are separate. That's ro.co/mischief. Go to ro.co/safety for black box warning and full safety information. Compounded medication is not required to and does not receive FDA review or approval, RX only. As investigators dug more deeply into Kouri, they realized that she had more to gain with her husband dead than alive. She owed nearly $2 million in debt because her real estate business was in trouble. And Kouri had signed a prenup that excluded Eric's business assets, except if he died prior to his wife while they were still married. At the time of his death, Eric had roughly $3 million in life insurance. Court documents would allege that in January of 2022, Kouri had forged Eric's signature on 2 life insurance policies, and there was evidence that she logged into Eric's life insurance policy agreement with his business partner and tried to change the policy so that she would be the beneficiary. And according to court documents, police were also looking into Kouri's mother, Lisa, after they found out that her partner had died from a drug overdose in 2006. Lisa was in a romantic relationship with a woman who she was living with and who shortly before her death had named her as her beneficiary on her life insurance policy. Lisa's partner died unexpectedly, and an autopsy was performed, revealing that her cause of death was from an overdose of oxycodone. Now, the woman did have current prescriptions for oxycodone and reportedly had struggled with abusing those medications in the past. Lisa was never charged in her partner's death. The investigation into Eric's murder was lengthy. In fact, it was a year after his death that Kouri had gone on that morning talk show to promote her children's book about grief and the death of a parent.
I'm new to all of this, so kind of doing research and reading books and things to try and understand, not only how to grieve as a widow, as a wife, but also, with my kids, how to help them understand what just happened. And what I have kind of found is, as I mentioned, it's kind of the 3 C's is how I visualize it. And it's, connection, continuity, and care.
Here she explains how the nights were the hardest.
The struggle that my kids were going through. And I actually, I went on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and trying to find something that we could use to cope at nights. Nights are the hardest, it seems like, for everybody when, dealing with anything. But I just wanted some story to read to my kids at night. And I just could not find anything. I couldn't find anything that really, suited them or helped them find comfort and peace. And so, I was like, let's just write one.
Not long after this appearance, Kouri Richins would be arrested on aggravated murder charges in May of 2023. She pleaded not guilty. In June of 2023, Kouri Richins appears in court for a bond hearing. Now, this hearing became like a mini trial, where the prosecution has to show some of their cards, or at least enough to persuade the judge to deny bail. On the stand, the prosecutor questions Detective Jay O'Driscoll about Kouri's statements the night Eric died.
She stated that before going to bed, they had a drink together to celebrate closing on a house for her business. She said that they got in bed between 9:30 and 9:45, and that shortly after getting into bed, one of the children had a nightmare, and that the defendant got out of bed and went to be with that child in their bedroom and slept in that bedroom until 3 a.m. or around 3 a.m. when she woke. She stated she returned to her own bedroom, got into bed, and felt that Eric was cold to the touch. She stated that she turned the light on, saw that he wasn't breathing and that he didn't look normal, and that she then called 911.
The detective also goes over Kouri's behavior, related to whether or not she had attempted to resuscitate her husband.
Investigators found text messages between the defendant and her best friend. That was her explanation to her friend that she conducted CPR on Eric prior to EMS arrival.
And do those text messages read, "I pumped so damn hard, so hard, screaming at him to come back to life"?
Yes.
You testified earlier, Detective, that EMS responded. Have you interviewed the first EMS responder?
Yes, I have.
What observations did that EMS responder make?
They told me that when they arrived, they began CPR compressions on Eric, and that upon beginning those compressions, Eric began to foam at the mouth. He stated that that observation indicated that CPR was not likely conducted before he arrived.
And as to whether or not Eric might have accidentally ingested fentanyl pills believing it was something else, there was no evidence to support that Eric was addicted to or abused illicit drugs.
Has the defendant made any statements regarding whether her husband, Eric Richins, used illicit drugs other than THC?
Yes, in several statements made by the defendant throughout the investigation, there have been at least 10 times that she has said that Eric does not use illicit substances and did not use illicit substances.
And just to be clear, other than THC?
Other than the THC gummies, correct.
On the night Eric Richins died, did investigators search the Richins home?
Yes.
Did they find any illicit drugs?
No.
Did they find any paraphernalia or packaging or other evidence of illicit drugs?
No.
Did they find fentanyl anywhere in the home?
Only that which was in Eric's body.
And what about the woman, CL, who allegedly sold fentanyl to Kouri?
Who is CL in relation to the defendant?
CL is an associate of the defendant. She cleaned houses for the defendant's business as well as her personal home at times.
Does CL have a criminal drug history?
Yes.
According to Detective O'Driscoll, CL shares that she purchased 15 to 30 fentanyl pills and then sold them to Kouri Richins on February 11th, 2022, 3 days before Valentine's Day.
In our interviews, CL told us that in early 2022, the defendant reached out to her either by phone call or text message requesting that she procure fentanyl for what the defendant reported was an investor who had a back injury.
And upon the defendant asking CL to get fentanyl, what did CL do?
CL told us that she reached out to an acquaintance of hers, acquaintance one, and requested that she introduce her to somebody that could sell her fentanyl. CL told us that after purchasing the pills from acquaintance two, she returned home to her house in Heber. She said that either later that night or the next day, the defendant met her in the driveway of that home and did a hand-to-hand exchange of pills for cash.
Now, if you'll recall, Eric's family would allege that Kouri had tried to poison Eric unsuccessfully on Valentine's Day with that sandwich. Here, Detective O'Driscoll details a second drug buy about a week later.
The defendant reached out to her again by text or call and said that she wanted some more fentanyl that was stronger than the previous batch.
And just a week later, Eric was dead.
Or what, if anything, in the carrier records for defendant's phone corroborate CL's testimony?
The cell records from the defendant's phone show several phone calls back and forth between her and CL in early 2022.
Do they show any text messages back and forth between the defendant and CL?
Yes, several.
Have you reviewed those text messages?
We were only able to see the timestamps and who the sender and receiver was. We're not able to see the content of those messages because they appear to be deleted from both the defendant's phone and CL's phone.
Have you reviewed the call history and carrier records of CL's phone?
Yes.
Does CL's carrier records and call history corroborate CL's testimony?
Yes.
CL has not been charged in connection with Eric's death. During this hearing, defense attorney Sky Lazaro would have some pointed questions for Detective O'Driscoll. Chief among them was CL. How credible could she be as an informant, considering she was staring down multiple state and federal charges?
You began the interview by explaining to CL essentially how dire of a situation she's in, correct?
I don't have the interview memorized, but I know we talked about that, yes.
Okay, well, you told her that she was on probation to drug court for 4 first-degree felonies, correct?
Correct.
Okay, a violation of that is a potential prison sentence, correct?
It would depend on the prosecutor, but that's potentially true.
Okay, a first-degree felony carries a possible penalty of life in prison, correct?
I don't know. I would have to reference the code.
So you told her she was facing problems with that, correct? That
Right.
This would be a violation. So she'd be on the hook for 4 first-degree felonies.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. And you also told her that having the firearm could potentially be a new crime, correct?
Correct.
And then you also told her that the U.S. Attorney's Office was essentially on board with screening drug distribution charges, correct?
I don't remember specifically.
Do you remember talking to her about potential federal charges?
Yes.
Okay. So she was aware that not only was she facing multiple first-degree felony prison sentences, she was also potentially facing federal charges, correct?
Correct.
And during that initial interview, she tells you that she didn't buy fentanyl, correct?
I don't know if she made that specific statement, but she talked about not knowing anything about fentanyl.
The defense tries to get the detective to agree that CL could have felt pressured to tell investigators what they wanted to hear to help them with their case against Kouri.
Several times you tell her to think through all of this and let you know if she wants to help. correct?
Yes, I gave her the opportunity to tell us up front whether she was willing to cooperate or if we should just not bother interviewing her anymore.
But this is after you essentially tell her that she has the potential of doing a considerable amount of state and federal prison time, potentially.
Yes, this is a common tactic in law enforcement to be able to leverage charges for information.
In fact, you did in this case leverage charges for information because you told her that you didn't care about first-degree felonies or federal charges. What you cared about was information about Kouri getting drugs, correct?
I told her that I was interested in the information that she may know about this case.
Okay, but you told her also that Eric died of a fentanyl overdose, correct?
Correct.
And you told her that you thought that Kouri gave him the drugs, correct?
I did not specifically say that.
You alluded to the fact that you needed information about Kouri getting fentanyl because that's how Eric died, correct?
I don't know if I made that specific statement, but the information that we tried to convey to CL was that we wanted to know the information that she may have regarding Eric's death.
And at the end of the day, the defense asks if there are any text messages from Kouri to CL asking directly for her to purchase illicit drugs.
You don't recall, or you didn't look for a pattern of communication between CL and the defendant, is that correct? You were focused on February?
I guess that depends on what stages of the investigation you're talking about.
I'm talking about any of them. Did you ever look and see if CL and the defendant texted each other about anything on a regular basis?
Yes.
And how far back did those go?
I'm not sure on exact dates again, but into 2021.
So for a period of time, because CL is working for the defendant, there's communication, correct?
Correct.
And nowhere in the communication between CL and defendant are there any text messages asking for drugs, correct?
We didn't find any, but there were also gaps in time frames in the phones when we looked at them.
Is anyone with her that could corroborate that she saw CL hand Kouri drugs?
Not that I know of.
The defense also asks questions related to an interview with one of Eric's best friends, who she refers to as JS. Now, according to JS, he would say that Eric had created that trust as a result of his considering getting a divorce, not because he feared for his life.
Eric changed or created these trust documents, correct?
Correct.
And his understanding, based on what he said that Eric told him, was because Eric was pissed or upset about a relationship that Kouri had, correct? Or he thought she had.
I don't remember the specifics of that part of the interview, but I do remember that JS was aware that Eric had made the trust.
And he doesn't specifically say anywhere in that interview that the trust was made because he was mad about this home equity loan, correct?
JS expressed to us that he understood that the reason that Eric created the trust was to ensure his son's well-being if anything were to happen to him.
JS would tell investigators that Eric and Kouri were doing much better than when he made that secret trust, placing his sister as his beneficiary.
At any point during that interview, did JS mention that Eric had said that at any point during he and Kouri's marriage, he was concerned that Kouri was attempting to poison him?
I don't recall, but I don't think so.
In fact, you present him essentially 3 scenarios of what could have happened to Eric, correct? That he potentially did it to himself knowingly, that someone else did it to him, or that it was accidental, right? And you specifically ask him if he thinks Kouri would have done it, and he says, no, in my gut, I don't believe so, correct?
I don't know if that was a direct quote, but yes, he said that he didn't believe that she would have done it.
And he also states during that interview that at the time of his death, Eric and Kouri's marriage was in a really good place.
Yes.
Correct?
But if their marriage was back on track, why didn't he change the beneficiary of his trust to Kouri, his wife, from his sister, or at least tell Kouri about it at the very least?
In those trust documents, the sister was made the trustee, correct?
From what I understand, yes.
And you asked JS specifically, or somewhere along the lines of, if they were doing so well, why would he have not changed that back?
Yes.
And he tells you that it was his way of ensuring that even if they were doing well at the time, if there was a divorce, he would get the last word in it, right?
I remember him using that phrase, getting the last word, yes.
And before the hearing was over, the defense would give a glimpse into a possible alternative theory, and it involves a trip to Mexico that happened just before Eric's death. He'd gone on a hunt with his friends in February of 2022, and there'd been problems with the outfitter who had organized that hunt because they hadn't procured enough permits, and Eric had been angry.
In your subsequent investigation, you know that Eric had had some heated conversations actually the night before he passed, or the night that he passed away, with that outfitter, correct?
We received information about that, yeah.
In fact, he was searching how far it was to drive from Scottsdale down there, correct?
Correct. Well, his phone showed that search.
Okay. And JS also told you that he had information or believed that this outfitter was somehow connected to the cartel, correct?
I don't recall. That sounds familiar, but I don't recall if those were the words that he used.
But essentially, he was
JS made a statement about the cartel when he was talking about Eric and that hunt, yes.
Okay.
Any hope that Kouri Richins had of getting bail had to have evaporated after Eric's sister Amy gave a powerful victim impact statement.
Eric died under horrendous circumstances. I am tormented at the thought of what he endured. I play it out in my mind. I go through the terrible sequence of events. I wonder when he realized he was in mortal danger. I wonder what Kouri may have said to him in his last moments. How long was he conscious, knowing he would die? Where were Eric's boys when all of this happened? Did they hear Eric's body fall to the ground? Did they catch a glimpse of their father taking his last breath? It's torture to think of. Why did Eric lose his life? Why did the boys lose their father? Was it because of Kouri's greed and desire to get life insurance and other assets? If so, that is abhorrent. How could anyone value human life so cheaply? I cannot comprehend it. I'm overflowing with grief and pain at the thought that Eric meant so little to her.
Kouri Richins would be denied bail. So what's next? A preliminary hearing is expected to take place at the end of August. Here, a judge will decide whether or not there is enough evidence to order Kouri Richins to stand trial in the murder of her husband, Eric Richins. The trial is expected to begin in 2025, and Kouri maintains her innocence. So we will definitely keep you posted on this case, and stick around for our bonus episode up next. Here, my co-host Brandon Morgan and I discuss the case, including the little bits that didn't make it into the show. And if you have a minute, head on over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the show. And it would be awesome if you would refer a friend. It really helps. And as always, thanks for listening. Stay with us for our Criminal Mischief bonus content, where we're going to go over the latest in the trial, including the prosecution's star witness testimony. We're going to talk about how the house cleaner for the Richins family testified that she sold Kouri illicit fentanyl pills 4 times leading up to Eric's death. And we're also going to go over the prosecution's alleged motive, that Kouri was in roughly $5 million of debt from her real estate flipping business, how she stood to gain millions from his life insurance and estate, and she had recently attempted to name herself the beneficiary of his policies without his knowledge. We're going to go into all of that, and then we're also going to share some really steamy text messages that have been introduced in court, showing that Kouri was in a romantic relationship with another man at the time of Eric's death and planning a new future with him. So we're going to get into all that up next on Criminal Mischief bonus content. And as always, thanks for listening. From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production, recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Ossorio, your writer and host.